Sup, bitches?
You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another episode of Media Opinions. In today's episode, I'll be talking about the concept of guilty pleasures. Now, guilty pleasures is a term I hear get used from time to time, and I kinda use it a little bit differently than a lot of people do, I think. A lot of people will use it to apply to so bad it's good things, but I've always just liked to use the term so bad it's good for that, because to me the term guilty implies some level of shame or embarrassment in enjoying it. But I never get that with So Bad It's Good movies. Everyone's on the same page with why those are enjoyable. People might disagree on what is so bad it's good, but at the very least, we kinda get the concept, you know what I mean? Like, I love So Bad It's Good movies. The Room? Great. Neil Breen? Great. I have a personal soft spot for Howard the Duck as well. I even like movies that are intentionally, bad and stupid sometimes. Like, Velocipaster was pretty fun, but it was very clearly made to be like that. Or there's companies like Troma who revel in making things that are intentionally shitty. I love Troma. Troma is my favorite film studio. And then, of course, there's things like Sharknado, which I don't even view to be in the same category at all, because it's very clearly a satire making fun of shark movies. And I think a lot of people are far too quick to dismiss that series because they think it's just, oh, it's intentionally bad, which it's like, yeah, it's a parody. Which I think you could also kind of make the argument with things like Velocipaster, but it's a little different. Then, of course, there's, things like Jack Frost and stuff like that, which are absolutely, parodies, but they're also intentionally made to be cheesy and over the top. My point is, none of these things are what I would call guilty pleasures for me. Like I said, guilty pleasures are something that I don't really use as a term very often, just because I take issue with the framing of it. There are literally only two things I can think of that I have ever labeled an actual guilty pleasure for me. Those things being the Medea movies and Y2K, a postmodern RPG. And let me explain my reasoning behind both of those things, and why I would call those guilty pleasures. The way that I define guilty pleasures, it's not that I feel shame or embarrassment for liking these things, and it is true that I do find these things ironic in part of my appreciation for them. In fact, I will say I also think probably Limp Bizkit falls into this category as well. Although with Limp Bizkit, it's a little bit different. Limp Bizkit, it's a little bit genuine, a little bit ironic. I think with Limp Bizkit, it's almost like it's so bad it's good, but I also can kind of appreciate it sometimes. But the reason I would call these guilty pleasures is because, for me, a guilty pleasure is something you're not really quite sure why you like it. The Medea movies, for example, are fucking terrible and always have the same ham-fisted message. Not to mention, the comedy is very much the same and repetitive and not that great, but for whatever reason, I have watched a really high amount of these movies, and have enjoyed them. That's not to say that there are no jokes that are redeeming and stuff like that in these movies, because obviously there is, otherwise I probably wouldn't have watched them. But I can't quite place the reason why I've enjoyed these movies. There's no logical reason for it. Now with Y2K, it's a little bit different. I actually genuinely like this game. I'm fucking obsessed with it. I don't know why, I just am. I think for me, it is genuinely partially genuine and partially ironic. Obviously the game is bad in many ways, but there are quite a few things I can appreciate it just because you can tell the guy who made it genuinely cares about it. For reasons I am absolutely not clear on, one of the things I look forward to the most is the Y2K 1.5 update. I love this game, and I have no idea why. It's frustrating, repetitive, the combat has bullshit stuff with some of the boss fights, but it's great. I've already done a whole review on this game, and I've talked about it a couple other times on the channel, so you guys know that I like this game, and I also acknowledge that it's bad in quite a few ways. But yeah, to me a guilty pleasure is something that you like, but you're not sure why. That's kind of the way I define a guilty pleasure, or something that you have a very weird, ambivalent like for, that you both like it and hate it at the same time, in a sense. I think for me, that's what a guilty pleasure is. So, like I said, for me, the only things I would really consider guilty pleasures are the Medea movies, even though I haven't watched the last few, because they look too bad even for me. And Y2K, I genuinely do really like. Like I said, Limp Bizkit, it almost falls into that so bad it's good category. Limp Bizkit might count as a guilty pleasure. I don't know, it's not a term I use a lot. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of using the term guilty pleasure, but it is a fun thought to think about and what I would consider to be a guilty pleasure. But anyway, that's all I really have to say for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Media Opinions. Let me know in the comments below if there's any guilty pleasures you have. What do you think of my assessment of the term? And anyway, have a good one. Toodles.
What am I watching? I don't know, but I hate it.
Subscribe to Fiji Red Eye.